The air in Vittorio's did not change when Marco Valenti stood still, but Isabella felt it change anyway, like a room that suddenly remembers it is holding a weapon. Her words had already left her mouth, clean, controlled, in Sicilian so precise it did not belong in a waitress's throat. The sentence itself was simple, but the meaning underneath it was not. Marco did not move at first, not because he was calm, because he was recalculating the world. The silence between them stretched too long for a restaurant and too short for a war. Luca's hand slid subtly under the table. Victor didn't react at all, but his eyes sharpened in a way that suggested he had just stopped trusting reality. Isabella stood still with the tray in her hands, but her mind was no longer inside Vittorio's. It was back in stone corridors. Back in voices that taught her how to survive by speaking less than men expected. Marco finally exhaled, not loudly, not visibly. But something inside him shifted forward, like a man stepping closer to the edge of a decision he could not undo. "You speak like someone who was raised inside the language," he said in Sicilian, slower now. Isabella did not answer, a mistake Marco would normally think, but this silence felt different. This was not submission, it was control. Luca leaned slightly forward. "Marco," "Quiet," Marco said without looking at him. That alone changed the table dynamic. Luca stopped immediately. Not obeying Marco's tone, but obeying what Marco's tone implied. Danger. Victor's gaze moved between them like a strategist watching two forces test distance before impact. Marco's eyes stayed on Isabella. "You understand everything," he said again, not a question this time. Isabella placed the tray down on the edge of a nearby table, slow enough that it did not look like hesitation. But it was. Because she had just crossed a line she had spent 3 years burying beneath silence. "Yes," she said finally, one word, enough to collapse the illusion. A guest nearby laughed too loudly at something unrelated, unaware that something in the room had already died and restarted. Marco nodded once, like the confirmation was expected. But his expression tightened, not anger. Interest sharpened into something more dangerous, recognition of risk. "You were listening," Luca said, more accusation than observation. Isabella turned slightly toward him now, just enough. "I was in the room," she replied. That sentence landed heavier than it should have, because it removed innocence from the equation. Victor tilted his head. "She's not staff." Marco did not correct him. That silence confirmed it. Isabella felt it then, the shift in how she was being categorized. Not invisible anymore, not furniture. Not background, a variable, a problem, or a tool. Marco stood slowly. The movement was deliberate, not rushed. Around them, guests continued eating, but the atmosphere had subtly reorganized itself around that single action. "Outside," Marco said. It wasn't an invitation. It was extraction. Isabella did not move immediately. That delay was noticed. Luca noticed it first. His jaw tightened slightly, as if confirming something he already disliked. Marco noticed it second. Victor noticed something else entirely, that she was calculating, not reacting, calculating. "You don't refuse me in places like this," Marco said quietly. Isabella met his eyes for the first time without hesitation. "I didn't refuse," she said. "I finished my shift." The words were simple, but the tone carried something sharper beneath them. Marco held her gaze. A long pause followed, the kind that determines whether a person leaves the room alive or changed. Then Marco nodded slightly toward the exit. "Then your shift just ended." Outside Vittorio's, the city felt louder than it should have. New York at night was never quiet, but tonight Isabella noticed it differently. Like sound itself had become untrustworthy. Marco walked ahead, not fast, not slow, certain of direction. Luca stayed slightly behind him. Victor walked parallel, but his attention was no longer on the city. It was on Isabella. She followed without being told again, because she understood something important now. Refusal was not a choice anymore, only interpretation of consequence. They stopped near a black vehicle waiting at the curb, driver already inside, engine already running. Marco opened the back door but did not enter immediately. He looked at her. "Get in," he said. Isabella did not move. A second passed, then another. Luca exhaled sharply. "This is where she stops pretending." Victor raised a hand slightly. Not intervention, observation. Marco didn't repeat himself. He simply waited. That patience was more threatening than urgency. Isabella finally stepped forward, but instead of entering immediately, she paused at the door, just long enough to make it a choice rather than compliance. Marco noticed that too. His expression shifted subtly. "You're either brave," he said, "or stupid." "I'm neither," Isabella replied, a pause. Then she added, quieter, "I'm just still alive." That sentence changed something in Marco's eyes, not sympathy, understanding, because survival was the only language every dangerous person respected. She entered the car. The door closed. Silence filled the space immediately, thick and contained. The car moved. Marco's penthouse overlooked the city like a quiet judgment. Glass walls, steel lines, minimalism that cost more than decoration. Everything inside it was designed to remove unpredictability, except Isabella. She stood near the center of the room while Marco removed his jacket slowly. Luca remained near the entrance. Victor moved toward the window, watching the city instead of them. Marco finally spoke. "Who taught you that dialect?" Isabella didn't answer immediately, because the answer was not simple, because answers carried weight here. "Someone who believed words mattered more than bullets," she said finally. Marco studied her. "That's a dangerous teacher." "Not dangerous," she corrected. Dead, a microshift passed through the room. Victor turned slightly. Luca narrowed his eyes. Marco stepped closer now, reducing distance deliberately. "You're Morty," he said suddenly. The name didn't land like an accusation. It landed like a diagnosis. Isabella did not react outwardly, but something inside her tightened. Marco saw it. "That reaction tells me everything," he added. Silence stretched. Then Isabella spoke. "I was Morty." That distinction mattered, past tense. Marco nodded once. "Then you understand what it means when bloodlines don't stay buried." Isabella's gaze sharpened slightly. "You brought me here for interrogation," she said. "I brought you here because you're a liability," Marco replied calmly, "and I haven't decided whether you're worth more alive or gone." That honesty was not cruelty. It was structure. A system of thinking that did not waste emotion. Isabella understood that immediately. Luca stepped forward slightly. "We should end this now." Victor didn't agree. Instead he said, "No," one word. Sharper than Luca expected. All eyes turned briefly toward him. Victor continued, "She already knows too much. Killing her doesn't erase that." Marco didn't respond immediately. He looked at Isabella again, as if seeing her not as a person but as an equation. "What did you hear?" he asked. Isabella exhaled softly, then answered. "Enough to know you're planning to take a union boss's daughter," she said, "and enough to know you think silence makes it invisible." Luca's expression changed immediately. Victor closed his eyes briefly. Marco didn't move, but something in his gaze deepened. "You shouldn't have understood that," Marco said. "I shouldn't have been in the room," she replied. A pause. Then Marco asked, quieter, "Who are you really?" That question landed differently than the others, because it was no longer about risk. It was about origin. Isabella did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked toward the glass wall. New York spread beneath them like an indifferent organism. "I used to belong to a family," she said finally. "Before it stopped existing." Marco's voice lowered slightly. "Morty fell 15 years ago." "Yes," Isabella said. A silence followed that felt heavier than conversation. Then Victor spoke almost carefully. "The architect was involved in that collapse." At the name, something in the air shifted again. Isabella turned slowly. "Say it again," she said. Victor hesitated. Marco answered instead. "The architect, Enzo Russo." The world did not break immediately. It waited. Then Isabella's breath stopped for half a second, not dramatic, not visible, but internal. Like something inside her had recognized a sound it had been avoiding for years. Marco noticed the shift instantly. "What is it?" he asked. Isabella's voice came quieter now. "Say the name again." Victor did. "Enzo Rosso." This time it landed fully, not as information, as memory detonating. Isabella stepped back slightly without realizing it. Her hand touched the edge of a nearby table for stability. Marco's eyes narrowed. "Talk," he said, but Isabella wasn't listening anymore, because the name wasn't just a name. It was a door opening inside a place she had locked with fire. Enzo Russo, the architect. The man who had erased her family and left her breathing as proof that something had survived when it shouldn't have. Her vision tightened. The room blurred at the edges. Victor took a small step forward. "Isabella," but she didn't respond. Marco moved closer now, but carefully, because he had seen something change in her posture, not weakness. Collapse under recognition. "You know him," Marco said. It wasn't a question anymore, it was confirmation. Isabella's voice, when it came, was barely controlled. "I knew him before he had that name," she said. And in that moment, everything inside her stopped pretending, because the ghost had finally remembered what killed her, and it was still alive. If you stopped here, you only know half the truth. The real story, the part that will shock you, move you, and stay with you, is still coming. Subscribe now, hit the bell, and come back. Because we're not done yet.